Hi, I'm Silvy, welcome to my channel. I am a knitter. I've worked in the fashion industry for 15 years and somehow I've ended up living in a tiny island in the middle of the Atlantic called Madeira. If you follow any of my other social media, you'll see that my intersection is very much luxury and craft, knitting, and a little bit of life stuff. So from this channel, you can expect a lot of fashion week vlogs, knitting projects that I'm working on, all the yarn shops that I discover on my travels, mostly throughout Europe, the fashion week circuit, and the UK. And of course, a little bit of life updates in between. Okay, so I thought I'd start with a little bit of backstory because none of this whole thing really makes that much sense without it. I previously lived in London for about 17 years and I worked in fashion for 15 of those years, which is kind of crazy to say out loud. But I was actually born in Italy and I'm half South African, so I grew up between the two. And the whole point of me moving to London was actually to study fashion design. It didn't quite work out that way, but I very much believe that I was meant to be in this industry because I soon, maybe like 1 or 2 years of living in London, I very quickly landed a job working in a model agency, which was just something that I didn't even know existed. When I got this job, I was an assistant at a really big corporate model agency, got very lucky with where I landed. Little did I know I was about to get thrown into the deep end in a huge way. But you know, I was young, I was willing, and I loved it. And that's kind of where like my career took off. After I spent a couple of years in the agency, I just kind of really realized that working 9 to 5, more like 9 till 9, wasn't really for me. And a big corporate environment wasn't really what I was looking for. So I left and I started, because I spoke Italian, I was regularly going to Milan anyway, started to make contacts there and I started work backstage, eventually fell into casting, which is what I still do now. But obviously being a freelancer in any industry, I think, but especially the fashion industry, there's always a lot of money at the top and there's always no budget at the bottom. For a long time, it wasn't really feasible for me to live in London full time, certainly not without doing any other kind of work. So what I actually did for a little while is I started traveling and I spent a lot of time living abroad. And that's when the cracks started to appear because the two lived realities that I was having became very, very dissonant. You know, I lived in Morocco for 2 years, 2.5 years, and I spent time living in a village in the middle of the mountains where we didn't even have mains water and we would have to sort of fill up the water tank from the tap in the communal tap in the village square. And then at the same time, I was going to Fashion Week and I was getting shouted at backstage about hair and makeup. Yeah, so that was the first time I quit my job, but somehow I keep finding my way back because I have quit several more times after that. I've always kind of been that crafty girl and I picked up crochet a long time ago and then I switched to knitting. And I just found that the more that I leaned into it, the more I found the sense of creativity that I think that I was craving from my career. Because at the end of the day, I love the industry that I'm in. I've just never really loved my specific role in it. I always wanted to do something more creative, but I kind of never felt like it was possible for me because I hadn't gone to fashion design school and I couldn't design clothes and things like that. And I'm by no means trying to be a fashion designer in any way, shape or form, but being able to be creative with knitting and creating things from my imagination or adapting patterns and things like that just really felt like, yeah, the creative outlet that I needed, that I was looking for within my work. But it's really grounded me and it's really helped me to balance the parts of my job that I don't enjoy doing so much, which I just think that is something that we can all relate to, right? So fast forward to the pandemic and I had just had my one and only daughter and we were living in London again and just started to really crave a more simple, more slow-paced, honestly more affordable way of living. London just felt like so suffocating with a new baby, juggling like rents that kept on rising, and we definitely got caught in the middle of that like initial rental crisis where prices went really crazy and you had to do all sorts of crazy things to get a flat in London, and it just started to feel like we were jumping through a lot of hoops to be in a place that I'm not entirely sure that we still even really wanted to be in. And so we were fortunate enough that we came to Madeira because my mum had a house here. And we didn't really know whether we wanted to stay, but it slowly just started to make sense, so we did. And it definitely hasn't been smooth sailing, especially on the knitting side. So let me get into that a little bit more because I actually find that that process has become a lot more interesting. I think in general, with things not being as accessible on a small island in the middle of nowhere, the way that we consume has become a lot more conscious. We definitely don't have access to a lot of stuff. And even with regards to knitting, that has become true. So there's a couple of different obstacles. We have a yarn shop in town, but we only have one. They are fairly well stocked. They sell a couple of bigger brands like Rowan, DMC, but primarily Rosario's Quatros, which is a Portuguese brand, which makes sense. And they actually have a lot of tapestry yarn because they think that's like a really big tradition here. So it is really well stocked, I will say that, but there's a lot of things like mohair is not really a thing, so there's a very limited, there might be like blue, white and black or pink, something like that. So there's not really a lot of color choice. They tend to have a large selection of what they have, but not a lot of selection of color within each thing that they sell. They don't have any interchangeable needles, they don't have any cables. It's kind of like just that one brand of needles that they sell, which I don't love. The points are really sort of blunt for me. Just to give you a sense that even though we have a really well-stocked yarn shop, we only have one, there's no choices. I did for a while start to just try and buy yarn here, but it just became very complicated. So I sort of started making decisions in a different way. I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna say, but Silvy, just buy it online. But even though we're in Europe, things take a long time to get to us, like a really long time. I recently ordered some yarn from Knitting for Olive from Denmark, and it's quicker from Denmark to Portugal than it was from Portugal to Madeira. So overall, I spent about a month waiting for the yarn to arrive. So it becomes more complicated to return it, so it just, the whole thing is just a little bit unpredictable. The one shop that I will shout out, which I absolutely love, and have actually bought a lot of yarn from, is a shop in mainland Portugal called Rosa Pomar. They are doing some incredible work. They have their own brand of yarn, and what they're doing is they work with local Portuguese farmers, and they are saving endangered sheep breeds that are native to Portugal. So they create a lot of yarn from Portuguese sheep, and quite often I will buy yarn from them, also because it does come a lot quicker being from mainland. They actually are fairly well stocked in terms of like interchangeable needles, cables, all that kind of stuff. They also sell some other brands. I think they sell Isaiah. Yeah, there's definitely a little bit more selection, so I will often shop from them. And actually, if you're visiting Madeira, there is someone who has a project working with Madeiran wool called Ulala Fibers, and I'll link both of those in the description below because I actually think that they're really worthwhile in general, but especially if you come into Portugal and especially if you come into Madeira, you should definitely try and make an effort to visit that project or visit Rosa Pomar in Lisbon. That's it. That's a little bit of background on who I am, what I'm doing, and I guess that if you're into knitting and fashion and a little bit of a slower, crafty pace of life, I'd love for you to stick around. If this is the kind of content that you enjoy, please like and subscribe, and I will see you very soon.